Well. Here we are. It's a new year. It's 2024. And, here we are with yet another tier list video. Now, one of my New Year's resolutions is to, revive this channel, okay? Because it's not that it's dead. It's just obviously I don't upload very often. The reason for that is rather logistical. There was a period of time where my microphone I used for recording needed to be used for something else, so I actually couldn't really record that much without having to carry it backwards and forwards from somewhere else. So that's no longer a problem. So recording is as easy as clicking a button now. But I'll have many videos coming out this year. All right, you'll see them when they come out. I'm not going to announce anything because I think kind of announcing it maybe takes some responsibility away from doing it, because at the end of the day, if it's not done, it hasn't happened, you know? So we are doing a tier list video today. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is because I want this to be a two-part, okay? So the first part today, we're going to find out where the armies are at the moment in 2024 in January before the incoming battle scroll. And then the next video, which I'll put out later this week, will be basically what should be done to adjust the power levels of the armies. And then when the battle scroll comes out, I'll give my thoughts on that. Now, when the battle scroll comes out, I will be doing probably a live react to that. And then over and onwards, Age of Sigmar, I will be doing a in-depth podcast looking at the changes with World Champion and General Legend Luke Morton. Okay, so if you're interested in seeing that, that's at the Onwards Patreon, link in the description. Otherwise, just watching this video, subscribing, liking, that's the best way to support me and my new effort to become the best Warhammer influencer on this platform. Okay, so what are we doing? We're doing a tier list. Now, I usually just kind of vaguely say what my criteria are, but I'm going to try to give myself some more parameters to work with this time, because I've done so many of these and I feel like every time my parameters are slightly different. And so I kind of want to deal with that now. So the first thing that I'll say is that this tier list is for competitive Age of Sigmar. Okay, that sounds kind of obvious, but even when I say competitive, I'm not even talking tournament Age of Sigmar, because that's not necessarily always competitive, okay? Of course, there are competitive parts to every tournament in terms of, maybe you go to a 200 player and the top 40 are very competitive players, but particularly maybe the bottom 80. Of course, there are some of them there who are competitive and just didn't do as well as they liked, but there's also other people there who are just enjoying this as a hobby instead of, competitive Age of Sigmar is also a hobby, but you know what I mean. They're enjoying other aspects of the game than trying to win as much as possible. So I'm talking about Age of Sigmar, where we're trying to win as much as possible, and we're not talking about how cool models look, and we're not factoring that into our decision of whether to take a unit. A lot of other content creators say stuff like that, and it's not necessarily my cup of tea. I do enjoy the painting side of the hobby, but for me, it's very compartmentalized, right? It's just Warhammer is okay, it's a game, and then we have basically merch we buy for the game, which happens to be the miniatures. That's kind of my way of thinking about it. So the miniatures for me, it's a collector's item for the game, but the game itself doesn't actually necessarily require you to have the miniatures. It's a bit controversial, but you can play on TTS, you can play with cardboard cutouts of models, you can play with literally anything, and it will be the same game. It's just the miniatures, immersion, narrative, collector's items, all that kind of thing. I enjoy it too, and we all enjoy that aspect of the game, but it's fundamentally not the game, right? So I'm talking about the game. So a pure we're looking at the units on the paper, we're trying to be as competitive as possible. What are the best armies for doing this? Okay, so that's the context. Now, the criteria will be two things. I'm going to mainly look at two things, because I think that these are the most important things at the moment, and it's what divides the top tiers from the bottom tiers, okay? And especially when we get to the middling tiers, you kind of see how this interacts. But I think basically at the moment, there are basically two proficiencies that an army requires to be good, okay? And the first one is scoring. So this is scoring battle tactics and scoring a grand strat. And the other aspect is brawling, okay? Which is basically killing your opponent. Now, the way that the game works at the moment is to deny battle tactics, you more or less have to kill your opponent. Yeah. Now, in the past, we had explicit battle tactics that were based around killing stuff. And so you would think that that means that to deny your opponent battle tactics, you would kill their stuff first and get battle tactics in the process. And that is true. But in the current season we have, battle tactics are quite a lot easier. And that means that the only real way to deny battle tactics a lot of the time is actually just to kill your opponent. That's what I've found anyway. And to kind of blow holes in your opponent's armies so that they don't have the facilities to do battle tactics. So, you know, certain armies require having wizards alive to do battle tactics. Certain armies require having multiple of the same unit alive to do battle tactics. You know, with Skaven, they have 3 priests to do the 3 battle tactic prayer. You kill one of the priests, right? So I think that's more or less how you deny battle tactics. Now, the reason that the killing one in previous editions is slightly different is because in previous editions, battle tactics were just quite a bit. Well, the generic battle tactics were easier, but there were fewer battle tactics from books. Okay, and so this meant that in a lot of games, 5 battle tactics didn't actually happen that often. Like dropping a battle tactic was fairly commonplace, even in an even game. Okay, whereas at the moment, you know, with Skaven, I've played many games with Skaven now, and I have dropped 1 battle tactic. Like, I'm not joking. Like, that, and that's not a reflection of me as a player, I don't think necessarily. I mean, obviously there's an element of that, but I think the army is so easy to score battle tactics with in most matchups that it really just doesn't have an issue. So there are a bunch of armies like that where, of course, you know, you have to make decisions properly to score the battle tactics, but if you have the right way of making decisions, it's much easier than it was before. So that means we have to kill stuff. So we have to score in the first place to be able to score 5 battle tactics, because there are armies here that can't, and they're just bad, okay? But we also need to be able to brawl. Now, you'll notice when you play an army that can score and can't brawl, what happens, right? Usually, you can stay up with your opponent for the first 3 turns, but there's a point where your shit dies, and then it's hard to do battle tactics, and it's hard to get objectives, right? Now, I think objectives are the main way in which games are won at the moment over battle tactics. You might force your opponent to drop like 1, but I find that objectives is the main way that I'm winning games at the moment. There are other armies that win through getting advantages on battle tactics. Mainly KO, I'd say, would be in that boat, because they're actually quite good at denying battle tactics, because they can, you know, be really kind of far away. They can jump to a side of an army and shoot them off. I'll talk about that more when I get there. But, yeah, when you play an army that can score into an army that can really brawl, you'll notice the difference in power levels between the armies. If you play in the fat middle versus a bunch of other equally kind of equal armies, or unoptimized strong armies, right? Because unoptimized strong armies versus an optimized weaker army can still lose, for sure. But if you verse an optimized strong army, you'll notice the difference. And it kind of feels like, you know, you're playing hockey and you're in like the amateur league and you get selected for the pro league, and then you just get completely just blasted by the pros, right? That's what it feels like when you're playing against these really strong armies. So, yeah, let's get to it. So, scoring, brawling, which ones can we do? Okay, so we're going to start off with Beasts of Chaos. This army, frankly, has been completely over-nerfed. I don't know why. I have some suspicions about maybe some personal biases of some people on the balance team against Beasts of Chaos. I don't know, I have some conspiracies there, but I think this army just has not deserved the nerfs that it's got. I would kind of like Games Workshop to release some patch notes or some explanations, but I suspect what's happened here is they've decided that 18 Bulgors coming off the board and then charging you, and then just if they get the double turn, they win, it's just a pretty shit player experience. I think we can all agree on that. And I think we can also agree that moving your opponent's models 2d6 off the side of the board is a terrible play experience. I think we can also agree that Ungor Raiders shooting off the board and then coming on and then shooting again is also a terrible play experience. So I think basically what's happened is all the strong elements of this Beast of Chaos army just are not very fun to play against. And that means that Games Workshop has probably decided to nerf them more than they would normally nerf an army. And I think for me, it's a toss-up between B and C for this kind of army. I don't think it can brawl very well, but in terms of scoring, it's quite good. I think for now, we're going to stick it in the B tier. This might move down as we go through the others, but that's where it is for now. Bone Splitters are obviously bin. Now, I don't think they're necessarily as hopeless as you would think, but they're still bad. Again, over-nerfed. Who knows why? Supply shortage issues, or I don't know, the army looks a bit silly. There's a bunch of reasons, but I over-nerfed for sure. And I think now, I think it is fairly obvious that they're going to get rid of them. Now, in terms of the strength of the army, you just don't get enough, I think, for what you should get in this sort of low bravery army. It just feels like with Bone Splitters, every new battle tome comes out with a way to just turn off commands or something, and it's just brutal, because it means you have to run this, like, you just have to run boars, because at least they're kind of a small unit size. But yeah, with Bone Splitters, I think I don't have that much experience playing with them or against them, but I think more or less the summation is that, okay, you can survive the one turn, you have the War, but can you play 5 turns of Warhammer is an issue. It's my understanding. Yeah, and I think also has been at the negative effect of quite a few, like, general systems nerfs, which when I go to the battlescroll video, I'll talk about why I don't like them. But I think, stuff like Arcane Tome getting nerfed, Blizzard getting nerfed, stuff like this, it all seems good, but all you did was nerf the bad armies more than the top armies, right? Like Seraphon getting Teleport Blizzard nerfed, okay, that's great. I'm glad we got rid of that. But there are a bunch of armies that got completely, like, shit stomped by that nerf, right? Bone Splitters is one of them, right? Being able to fast stun the Maniac Weird Knob up and do Blizzard was a trick that this army was using. It had a trick. It didn't used to have many tricks. Like, it used to have the War and maybe some Icebone damage and the Wergog Mask, obviously. But other than that, didn't have much going on. So that gave it something, and now it's lost that something, really. Because, yeah, you have Blizzard, but your opponent has to walk into range of you, so there. That's where they are. Okay, Cities of Sigmar. I think that before they nerf, they probably would have been an S. And then now, I think they're kind of middle to low A. Why is that? Well, it's because a lot of the other armies up here just completely just destroy them. They have some really horrible matchups. I think it's hard to imagine that if they get nerfed again, that they're going to be particularly great. They're good now, but have problems. So if they get nerfed, then they might play those good matchups worse. Like, for example, some of the changes that could happen. Like the Warforger spell only working on melee, so that the shooting doesn't work. That's probably what it should have been originally. Another change could be the Command Core heal, which right now you can basically heal the same unit D3 times 3 times, right? And that means you can get 3D3 Fusiliers back, and you can do that twice in the same phase. So you can get back 6 D3 Fusiliers if you have 2 Command Core. That probably will die in a fire, as it should. But if they don't have that, a Fusilier is good, and I think the answer is no. If they don't have those both things, Fusiliers are just fully dead. So they should come down in points. But I don't think Games Workshop usually does that. They usually just nerf in one direction and don't necessarily pull back, to reach a middle level of power. So I think if this army gets nerfed again, it's horrible. But for now, scoring is pretty good. But brawling is definitely the strength of this army. Just being able to do damage and survive is great. Sometimes you have some difficulty doing 5 tactics, I think. But as long as you take enough cavalry in the Cavaliers, you can do it. So that's them. Okay, Daughters of Cain are the most extreme example of I can score, but I can't brawl for shit, and I think that puts them in the C tier. I think I'd struggle to put them higher than this. Of course, the scoring is immaculate. Like, it's maybe the best scoring army in the whole game. But the brawling is so bad. Like, they actually just cannot fight so many armies in the A and S tier that I just can't. I can't put them higher than this, I don't think. It is a solid army from a scoring perspective, but it's one of those armies where if you do play the top armies, you just really feel it. It just really feels hard to win games. So that's where I'm going to put them for now. Okay, the new Flesh Eater Courts. I'm not really sure what the build is for this army. When I did the review video last, I was kind of hot on them, but as I've kind of sat with it, written a bunch of lists, watched games, played games, I'm just not really convinced it works. Like, it's like the analogy is, when you're making, what would be a good example? Like some kind of curry, and you're just putting in a bunch of different spices, and individually those spices have merit, but when they're all together, it just tastes a bit like weird, and you don't know why, and you're just kind of stuck with it. That's what Feck feels like, right? We just have all these good abilities, but it just doesn't really feel like they're necessarily held together that well. You look at some other books where the books are so well held together. Something like Skaven, I think, is so well held together that it becomes very easy to write army lists. With Feck, it's very difficult because your grand strat isn't necessarily tied to your build. There's one or two battle tactics that are. So make charge with 2 knights, and then take an objective with a courtier, knight, and serf. These are kind of things that tie you to army builds, but the army build's just so awkward aside from that. And it just kind of feels like one of those books where everything you do that's good, you just have like a negative side effect from. So I think this army has the potential to be great once the build is worked out. For now, I'm probably not going to put it higher than A tier, like the bottom of A tier, or maybe the top of B. I'll put it at the top of B for now. We'll come back. I think that's probably a fair spot. Now that I'm looking at this, I think Beast of Chaos can already go down, because there's going to be other stuff here that's better. But I think that makes sense for now. Okay, Fire Slayers just got a fairly substantial buff in a FAQ that wasn't announced and just came up. That's my favorite type of FAQ, by the way, one that isn't announced and just comes out when no one's saying anything. It's great. Please explain yourself. Okay, but anyway, the Fire Slayers FAQ came out, and Flame Seekers can now exist in the army, which is nice. But it doesn't necessarily move the needle that much. I think I probably would have put them here now, and probably I'm going to put them here now. Can they score? Kind of. And can they brawl? Kind of. So, just fairly okay at both, but not particularly great at either. Oh, yeah, with Feck, my brawling and scoring attribute, I think the scoring is fine, and the brawling I'm not convinced about, personally. But we'll have to see what happens. I just... At the end of the day, getting 6 deed points is just like... It's like... It's easy if you invest in it, but then if you don't, it's impossible. So I don't know. It's this sort of army is not necessarily my favorite. Okay, Gits. Gits were great, but there's been a meta shift that I think makes them like a little bit worse. They just have a fair amount of counters, I would say. I'd probably put them in B below Feck, personally. It kind of happened a few months ago. I released this podcast on Onward saying that they were super strong. It's possible they need nerfs again, but I think the meta has evolved in such a way where certain armies that are exceedingly good against Gits have become strong, and that the shift with Gits to running more Boingrot Bounders does make them worse against some things that they were good against. Like, I think it makes them worse against KO. And I think they still have a strong matchup in the KO, but it's this thing where once your good matchups start getting worse, and your bad matchups they've always been terrible for Gits, right? Ever since we've had a few nerfs to this army, the bad matchups are just so bad. Now I just think the army is just It's a bit too much of a risk. So it can score great. The army is immaculate at scoring, okay? It is so good at scoring. But the brawling is the issue. There are a bunch of armies that can just completely slap you off the table. And when Gits, you always have a chance, because of the Loon Shrine, you always have a chance to come back, but it comes down to some pros later in the game, so that makes it not reliably super strong. So that's why it ends up in this B tier for me. Okay, Idanet Deepkin. The build is Sharks at the moment. I think it's quite a strong army. I don't know if I would put it higher than this. It's probably like the top of B, bottom of A sort of territory. The scoring is not great, and the brawling is, I don't know. It can be good, the scoring. I think with IDK, it's basically like just a bit matchup dependent. Like your scoring can be really good if you're in a good matchup. It's just a very like win more kind of army, as it always has been. And the Sharks build is kind of a bit more like that. You know, it can sweat and play 5 turns, but it's just it often ends up dropping a battle tactic, and most importantly, it ends up losing on the primary in a bad matchup is the problem. It really has the potential to just bounce in some key shooting phases off high armor, and then it's just got, like, not much of a chance. You know, you're playing Khorne. What can it do against 30 Blood Warriors? I don't know. Stuff like that is an issue, okay? But then in other matchups, it can be super good. So that's where Idanet Deepkin is. Okay, Iron Jaws. It has some kind of, like, okay matchups, but overall, I'd struggle to put it. I'd struggle to put it higher than D, if I'm honest. Like, yeah, it is. It's okay. I just think it's still just like, it's like almost there. It's like just almost there, but it's so close to being there, but then it's just so close, but yet so far from being good. Like, you see it played, and the first 2-3 turns, it's like, this army's sick, and there's just a point where it just all comes crashing down, and it's just over. Like, you play Iron Jaws into Seraphon, and you're like, alright, I've killed his whole army, except Kroak, a Slan, and an Astrolith Bearer. Surely I'm fine now. And then your whole army dies in 1 turn. I'm not even joking that this can happen, right? This army is like so fragile in a way. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but certainly if you get doubled by a Seraphon player with 3 models left, you probably got nothing left after that. Iron Jaws is just it's just almost good, okay? But there's a fundamental problem the army has in playing 5 turns in the brawling aspect. I think the scoring is decent now, for sure. My only problem with armies like this is, since you've lost, you know, like 5 Ardboys for 80 points, it's very difficult to do these kind of like surround and destroy style battle tactics where you need to put units somewhere and have them do nothing. Like, even the Iron Jaws battle tactic where you have to have 2 in the middle it's like good, but it's not going to work every game. Like, you can't in every situation, right? It sometimes it ends up being a gameplay decision that forces you to do something. And when it's selecting battle tactics, I think that those battle tactics are the last ones you want to pick. Like, battle tactics that force you to do something on the board you don't want to do should just not happen that much. Like, so if you're doing Surround and Destroy, and you're playing Skaven, for example, and your grand strat is, I need to run away with my heroes and keep them alive, then that's a great turn 4, turn 5 battle tactic, right? I'm going to stick my 3 Plague Priests in 3 separate corners, and you can't hit them, and I'm getting my battle tactic, right? That's an example of where what you want to do and the battle tactic is aligned. With Iron Jaws and armies like this, I would just feel like sometimes it's just not entirely aligned. Like, Iron Jaws, I kind of feel like in order to play 5 turns of Warhammer, you actually want to sit back and do nothing for most of the game. But you can't do that because they just don't have the tactics to be able to do that. Big War can do this, which is why Big War is way better than Iron Jaws, okay? And that's why Iron Jaws, I think, is down here for me. It could be like C, bottom of C, but I think these 3 armies in C are probably better than Iron Jaws, so I'll put them here for now. Cruel Boys, I think, is better than Iron Jaws, but not by much. I think this army is really not great. Like, it's cheaper now, but I watched my mate Orkman, who's on Team Australia, trying to kill stabbers with gut rippers, and it just ruined the army for me. It's just like you just can't kill crap. And I just cannot play armies in this meta that do not kill crap. It just makes the game so hard. You look at 20 clan rats, and you're trying to kill 20 clan rats with cruel boys. It's just way harder than it should be. What kills 20 clan rats and cruel boys? Honestly. Do I have to shoot 3 units of bolt boys at 20 clan rats to have a chance at killing them? But then even if I don't roll 6s, right, I'm probably not going to kill them. So how do I kill 20 clan rats with cool boys? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to it is. Yeah. So this kind of thing where we can't kill crap just makes them so bad at brawling. I just think that the brawling is so bad. The scoring is okay. I think with this army, particularly in the early game, it can be decent. But I think when it gets to the mid game is when, you have this led into the maelstrom prophecy that happens with cruel boys. I'm gonna start using that. The led into the maelstrom prophecy is when you're an army that's bad at scoring, and you get to turn 2 and 3, and you don't have any other tactics you do, and it forces you to charge a hero and a battle line unit in to a spot where you don't want them to be, and end up tagged in combat. So if you get the double, they can't do anything. Okay. That's the led into the Maelstrom prophecy. That's what's going to lose you some games, okay? So if we have that prophecy, the army's just not that great. So yeah, I'd put them there. Okay, Blades of Khorne. I've been umming and ahhing about this army, but the Spawn Khorne build is broken, okay? It just is. Coven of Thrix is just broken. Many reasons for it. The first of all is that it just addresses 2 main issues of Khorne, which are turn 1 battle tactic and the grand strategy. Okay, so that's the scoring aspect of Khorne that normally ruins it. Now it's super easy to score 5 battle tactics and grand strat, so it's one of the best scoring armies, right? Sometimes turn 2 and 3 can be a little bit ropey, but certainly the late game and the early game is easy. Okay, now the brawling aspect is maybe the slight weakness of the army, a little bit. Because you get a lot of stuff, because your summoning's great, especially with the Coven of Thrix thing, where you can get all these spawn from Burning Sigil and Killing Scar over and over again. But none of it is particularly great. So, now if you run 30 Blood Warriors, or 20 Blood Warriors and 10 Blood Warriors, a bunch of Blood Warriors, I think it gets better, because it's hard to kill, right? So, okay, maybe the damage isn't as strong as other armies, but at least it's survivable, and that means that you have a better chance of getting objectives, which is where I think the scoring aspect of Khorne is a bit weaker. So, I guess brawling is kind of a proxy for can it take objectives, really, but the brawling aspect it can be weak in Khorne. I think too many people run too many Blood Reavers. Blood Reavers just die, okay? Clan Rats kill Blood Reavers, alright? Okay, yes, Blood Reavers can hit back, but if the Clan Rats hit first, they're probably going to kill enough Blood Reavers that... Okay, maybe they kill 4 Blood Reavers, right? Because they're a 6-up save. And then you kill, 4 Clan Rats back, or something, and then you run, and then he doesn't, because he has Battle Shock immunity, right? So, that's the problem with Khorne. But I still think that the army is probably an S-tier army, okay? Particularly with the Spawn Khorne build. And I think, if we're going to look at stats, I think the stats would back this up. But I probably would put this here. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I probably would put that there. I maybe need another tier, because I think there's 2 armies that are kind of in another tier. But we'll get to them when we get there. Caradron Overlords, I think, are very much like a top of A tier army. Okay, I would never put them lower than this. So the scoring is immaculate with KO, up there with Doc for maybe better than Doc. All right, this army's battle tactics are an actual joke. Okay, I played a couple games of KO. I played one as a fill-in, and then I played another couple, just to give some other people some practice games. And you really just have to do nothing to get battle tactics with this army. It's literally just okay, turn 1. I'm going to say this unit of Arcanauts counts as 2, and then walk on objectives, and now I control more objectives than my opponent, so I get the battle tactic. Or I do opening salvo, and I shoot off his 10 screen 18 inches away or something. Or And then you get to later parts of the game. So, all right, just put these units here, surround a destroyer, get 3 units out in their territory, get this, then put them back in the boat, get that, and then just move my whole army in a boat into my opponent's territory and get intimidated. You know, stuff like that, right? It's just so easy to just do nothing. But the battle with KO is getting the objectives. That's difficult. And the reason it's become more difficult is because the army has gotten much worse at brawling, okay? Since the nerfs to Thunderers, you just have a lot less damage. I think with KO, you kind of look at an enemy army, and for the most time, you just can't kill the whole army. I think you're going to struggle to ever be in a situation where you can table your opponent with this army, because it's actually just quite a low damage army now, at the end of the day. If your opponent does something like really dumb and just kind of exposes a bunch of stuff, or has like an army that's a bit fragile. So for example, a lot of these lower armies here are quite fragile and bad at brawling, and KO can just really just table these. Like stuff like Iron Jaws or Daughters of Cain, even Fire Slayers to an extent, if you can kill the Battlesmith. All of these armies can struggle to actually survive KO, but for a lot of these other armies up here, right, you can see they're quite durable. They all have some aspect of recursion or summoning, and so that means that KO, an army that has neither, is not going to survive. It's not going to win like a war, like an actual battle, like a fair battle throughout 5 turns. So KO needs to win by basically being a little bit of a bitch and just running away and like just doing battle tactics, killing key units and winning on points. And a lot of the time the margins end up being quite small with this army. There's a few armies that have a critical weakness to KO up here, but a lot of the top armies don't, and so it ends up being a bit of a brawl. Okay, Lumineth. Lumineth to me is a player's army, and it's better than I thought it was for sure. Like last time I would have put it down here, but I don't think it should go anywhere lower than this. I don't think it's in A tier for me. The army, it does have a lot less on the board, but what makes it strong is the aspect of, I think basically Total Eclipse and the two disable spells are still just the obnoxious thing about the army. Gives it like a strong matchup potentially into Skaven, which is a top army for sure. I'm not sure how the Seraphon matchup goes. I think it's probably good with Teclis, but there are also issues with Seraphon like potentially unbinding your stuff. I'm not sure actually how that matchup goes, but it probably have play there. They're not good against every army. Like, of course, OBR is a hard counter to Lumineth with Null Myriad, and there's not that much play there. Yeah, and there are also a bunch of other armies that I think have a really good shot of just murdering Lumineth. And obviously Khorne, the Spectre of Khorne is a major issue. It's still a winnable game for Lumineth though. Like, Khorne is not necessarily a 100% win into magic armies. Khorne's one of those armies where a lot of the units are kind of weak to magic. Like, you look at a unit like Blood Warriors, if this unit didn't have a 5-up magic shrug, it would like have a really bad weakness against magic, right? No ward save, relies on armor to stay alive, is slow, has an attack profile that if it gets debuffed, it starts to do no damage. Like, all these kind of aspects, right, make it so if you're playing Blood Warriors and you fail spell ignores, then you're in trouble. It's also low bravery, so that means that if your Lumineth puts, one of the disable spells and a -1 bravery debuff on you, you're in trouble with the Blood Warrior unit, okay? So, Lumineth still has play into just about every army, but it's just hard. You just have to be really good, right? You just can't make mistakes with this army, so that's them. Okay, Nighthaunt, I think can go, like, here. I think probably it is better than Beast of Chaos, so, I think that this army is maybe better than people give it credit for. It's still not great, but I think in an 8-player teams, for example, it can be played. I think it has potential. The scoring is questionable. For sure it's questionable. Very questionable. That's always been the problem with the army. I think the brawling is decent for sure. I think the brawling can happen. I just think the scoring is just not. The scoring makes you do stuff you don't want to do. That's really what it means, right? So you can't play the army in a perfect way if you just need to just do stuff for the sake of scoring. Like, Led into the Maelstrom with this army is just not that great. I mean, at least you have retreat and charge, but charging heroes, like all the heroes are kind of slow and squishy. So, I mean, you could run a Dreadblade Harrow, but do you really want to run a Dreadblade Harrow? I don't know. So that's them. Okay, Magakin of Nurgle. I think this army's insane. I think it belongs in S tier for sure. For me, this is one of the top armies in the game. It has so many good matchups into the armies that are below it. The armies above it, I'm not really sure. That's probably the weakness. But in terms of the armies below it, it should win most of the time. KO can be a bit ropey. I think Cities is fine. All of these kind of other mid-tier melee armies is not even really a game because of Glotkin and Plague Bearers and Sloppity Barrelpipe. But look, if you play Gits, it shouldn't really be a game. If you play Fire Slayers, that game should be a complete joke. If you play any of the Orc armies, I think it's just so easy. So I think Nurgle, it can be up here. I just think that the slight problem of the army is that the ability to score is great, but not on turn 1. Okay, so I think that's the slight weakness of the army, is it can't score reliably turn 1 on every mission. And so that means, matchups aside, it can actually lose some close games just because of that turn 1 weakness. So Nurgle, great, amazing, super strong army, but the reason it ends up to this kind of like bottom tier of the S, I think is mainly the matchups against the other 3 top armies, and no, one of them's okay, but 2 of them not great, like Khorne and the other army I'll speak about in a second is not so great. But the aside from that, the main issue is the turn 1. Okay, all right, OBR. I might surprise people slightly with this. I'm gonna put them here. All right, that seems weird. Okay, I'm aware of that. I don't think that this army is that great. I might even put them lower than this. I might actually put them. I'll put them here. Now, I thought this army was going to be fine after the nerfs, but with the exception of a few amazing people playing it, I think most people have done quite badly with this army. And it's just not good at scoring, alright? And it's not particularly great at brawling either. So, what is it good at? Well, it's good at having a 2-up ignore against magic. But does it beat Seraphon anyway? Probably. But I've seen people lose against Seraphon. I've seen people lose to Lumineth, even with Null Myriad. I've seen people lose to all sorts of magic armies with a Null Myriad OBR. Because the army just can't score. So, even if you're just playing against like Tzeentch, and, Tzeentch player can't do shit, it's still got that thing where OBR, can you play 5 turns of a game and expect to score 5 tactics? I just don't know. It's just like the book tactics have just been. The Grand Strat's also not great. Like, you can go spellcasting Savant, okay, but the Immortus will die eventually, and if it just has to kill one, if you just have to kill one foot hero, a lot of armies can do that super manageably. Okay, yeah, magic armies might struggle to take out that foot hero, but a lot of these melee armies, like Gits, they just have enough damage to walk through you, will eventually just kill your army anyway. So, yeah, this army, since the recursion got nerfed, I don't think it necessarily has the ability to play 5 turns against every army. I've seen builds that are more like Nurgle builds, where they're more focused around Hero Hammer. I think those have been more successful and where the army should go. I also think that Null Myriad, as much as it's great, I think that against armies, to bring a list that has more capabilities against more armies, you probably need to go something like Crematorians, just to have some options to win melee matchups. Because you play Lex Skaven and you're playing Null Myriad, like, you just don't really have a chance. But if you run Crematorians, at least you have like an extra bit of melee capability that can get you somewhere. So I put OBR here for now. Okay, Ogre Moor Tribes, I think are actually down here for now, which saddens me that they're this bad. But the army, like, this is a classic case where Games Workshop is slightly misunderstood internal versus external balance. So the reason that everyone was running 6 Stonehorns is not because Stonehorns are the best thing in Age of Sigmar. It's because the rest of the book is bin. Okay? Now, why is the rest of the book bin? Well, if you look at the top half of this table, the vast majority of the armies that are up here have recursion. Okay? And they also have summoning. Alright? Now, what that means is if you want to win a game of ogres with gluttons, okay, for example, it's very difficult, okay, because you can kill stuff, but it won't die permanently. Like, you play gluttons against Feck, you kill stuff, but you don't kill the whole unit, and then it comes back, and then you take a hit, but you don't have any recursion, and you have no durability, okay? That means that you just can't play 5 turns. So the scoring is actually great with ogres. It's always been great with ogres, but the brawling is bad. It's, like, really bad at the moment. And the builds that use monsters are so much worse than they were. I think it's a really undeserved nerf. I really hope that they get something this battlescroll, because this army's in desperate need of just points reductions across the board. Like, if we're gonna play gluttons, just let people have more gluttons, okay? Like, I know that they're cheap now. I think they're 240 now. Honestly, just make them like 200 points or like 210 points or something, right? Just as an experiment. Let's see how it goes, okay? Because that experiment in the game hasn't necessarily been run. Like, we have a shit unit that has some major flaws of durability, but let's just reduce its points and see how it goes. It just doesn't necessarily happen that much. I think in this game, most of the time, if they see a shit unit, they just tend to give up on it. And it just feels like they've kind of given up on ogres. Like, we're just going to nerf them and then not address the issues necessarily. Like, why are the heroes so insanely expensive? Like, they're so expensive compared to other armies. That's, like, something that definitely needs to have a look at. The foot heroes, they're so expensive. Maybe just make Slaughtermasters 2 casts. I don't think the world would fall over if they had 2 casts, okay? You know, armies like this that don't have any recursion or summoning just need to be more powerful at the start of the game than other armies. That's how they're balanced, okay? So, the fact that with ogres, even like, you know, you're playing ogres against, like, for example, I don't know, Nurgle. And, like, I feel like even if Nurgle didn't summon anything, you're still not going to win. And so that just means that there's a massive imbalance there, because Nurgle should have to win through summoning, okay? But if they can just kind of fight ogres and win anyway, then I think we have a problem there. So ogres just need buffs for sure. Okay, Big War for me is an A tier army, okay? This army is exceptional at scoring battle tactics. Now, it also kind of has a bit of play into everything. I think you can kind of play like a 5-turn slow game and have a chance against most of the armies. But KO is, I think, the major no for me. I think Khorne is quite bad too, with Spawn Khorne. But KO for me is the major one where I'm like, okay, this is the main problem for Auric War Clans, in general. I think Cities of Sigmar can also be quite bad. But the S tier armies are mostly playable, I think. Like, again, into, you know, some of the armies up here, it's mostly playable. There's one that's not, but definitely into Nurgle and I think Khorne, it's playable, I think, for sure. Okay, we have another one of the S tiers next, which is Seraphon. This army is disgusting. Okay. The scoring is, like, pretty good. Sure, it's pretty good. The brawling, though, is just ridiculous, okay? Like, this army just does just a silly amount of damage in the hero phase. And a lot of it feels like there's not a lot of counterplay. A lot of the time playing against Seraphon, I just kind of feel like I'm hoping for a miscast, and for the priorities to go my way. Because Seraphon, being an elite magic army, is still a little bit priority dependent, and it's also reliant on not getting miscast, okay? I can't believe that this army is this good, considering it's been nerfed, like, a lot. But a lot of the other armies in the game that were kind of threatening it a little bit. So I think Soulblight and OBR were quite bad matchups. And they've been nerfed a lot. And that has just made Seraphon stronger for sure. So for me, I think Seraphon is up here. It's one of the strongest armies in the game. There's not really many counters. And that's the sign of an S tier army, right? Like, when you don't really have that many counters. I think the counters to Seraphon are probably just Khorne. there are armies that have play into Seraphon. I think Nurgle and Skaven both have play into Seraphon, but it can still go horribly wrong and you get double turned and the game's over. Okay. I'm sure many of us that have played Seraphon with an optimized build have been in a situation where it looks like we've taken control of the board and it's going to be fine. But then what happens is Seraphon has a magic phase where they completely just blast you off the table, and then they summon 10 Saurus Guard, and now you know that you're never going to kill any of their heroes, and then they get a double turn, and then they kill you again and summon another 10 Saurus Guard, and the game's over. Okay? So Seraphon is a challenge. Now, what would they nerf to get rid of Seraphon? I will talk about in the next video, but the obvious one for me is Saurus Guard, but like just the summoning. But I'm sure that they will do that, but I will talk about it in the next video. So scoring, pretty good for Seraphon. Brawling, like, amazing. One of the best armies in the game for sure. Okay, Soul Black Gravelords. I'm going to put this army in the B tier. Now, they might slightly surprise people, but I think that, again, this army is just probably a little bit slightly over-nerfed. Of course, it's still solid. Still like a really good army, in my opinion. But I think the scoring is awesome. The brawling is not. Okay? Because the damage is just not there. Alright? Like, we can hope in with Graveguard, but Graveguards suck. Alright? They're just not good. Okay? They're just not a good unit. There are just many units in the game that do what Graveguard do, just better. Okay? Now, the Ascendant unit in Soul Black Gravelords for me is still Direwolves. Alright? They're fucking excellent, alright? But it's not a whole army, okay? You cannot make a whole army out of direwolves. Zombies are very expensive now. Zombies are still good, but they're very expensive, so you just get a lot less. And ultimately that means that if you try to fight your opponent head on, it's not necessarily going to work out with Soul Blight. So how do you win with Soul Blight? You win by paying 5 turns, scoring battle tactics, scoring your grand strat. But again, it's got that kind of thing that the Doc has, where if you play one of these ARS tier armies, you do kind of feel like, okay, I can't really, like, fight, though. You know, you start to feel like that a little bit, right? But against, you know, armies that you can brawl against, the scoring is definitely going to carry you through. Okay, Slaanesh. For me, still really good. It's boring as shit. It's not for everyone, because the list building is just, like, incredibly boring. Because it's basically, like, 2 or 3 good war scrolls. Maybe 4. Like, Bliss Barbs, Slick Blades, maybe Fiends, Contorted Epitome, and then maybe you run Bellic or Glutos, okay? That's like 6 things that you can run, alright? That's kind of it. But the army is kind of a good benchmark army for me. Like, if you want to see if an army can play the game, play a game versus Slaanesh. If it feels like you can play, the army is good. If it feels like you can't play, then the army is probably quite bad, okay? So it's a good benchmark army. It's kind of a lower A tier army. The scoring's quite good. I think sometimes in the early game, it can be a little bit ropey, and they kind of have this, they don't have a lead into the Maelstrom prophecy, but they can have, like, a death by 1,000 cuts prophecy, where you have to target stuff 3 times into something you don't want to, or you have to shoot in a way you don't particularly want to, or it also kind of has the take an objective with a demon and a mortal prophecy, which kind of can be bad sometimes depending on the positioning. You know, things that make you do stuff are not that great, and sometimes you have to do it with Slaanesh. But the grand strat is auto-scored, right, with the no summon demons thing. Yeah, I mean, the brawling is okay. I think that's kind of the weakness of the army, is it's just okay with the brawling. Like, you can kind of fight. It's kind of got a similar thing to KO, I think, where you're never really going to have a hopes of tabling some of these top armies, but maybe you can fight enough to claim some objectives. But at the end of the day, the problem with Slaanesh is, well, okay, you fight, but then you're going to have to somehow end up on objectives with Bliss Barbs, okay? That's because you need bodies to score, right? And I think that's the weakness of the army, for sure. It's also a little low range, I'd say, this army. Okay, so next we have Sons of Behemoth, which I think is a solid army. I think it's a solid B for big army, okay? And I probably put them, like, here. I don't have too much to say here. I think the scoring is obviously weak on the battle tactics department. slightly better in King Broad Stomp, or if you're going to run brackets, you know, you're basically picking between am I good at objectives or battle tactics. You can't necessarily get both. And the brawling's okay. Against a lot of these A tier armies you can brawl, but you get to play the S tier armies, you just can't. Okay, that's basically the problem with Sons of Behemoth. It's just these S tiers. It's just not really possible to win these games. So yeah, I think they're there for me. Okay, we have Slaves to Darkness. I'm gonna put them probably about here. I think that they're slightly undercredited. This army can be good. Should I put them here? Yeah, no, I'll probably put them like maybe slightly. Let's put them like here, like still in B tier, but maybe slightly lower. They should be below IDK and Gits and below OBR. Sorry, subbing down here. So yeah, okay, they're good. They're kind of just okay at both. I mean, Slaves to Darkness for me has just always feel like, okay, you just look at some of the other Chaos armies and it's like, well, I don't have any summoning, so surely I should be better at fighting. And the answer to that is just not always the case. Like, so you're not really better at fighting. So a lot of these builds have kind of changed to be these Ravagers builds where you just pretend you're a normal Chaos army and you have summoning. But those builds, like, in my opinion, you look at them and you go, okay, you have 4 units of 20 Splintered Fang, and then what? Right? What do you do after that? You can just play, like, all this useless crap. Like, okay, Untamed Beast, cool. You get to move 6 inches at the start of the game towards your doom. Like, they're just gonna die and do nothing, like, and lose to everything in combat. So what are they for? I don't know. I think that they're an incredibly overrated unit and have always been. I think people, as a general rule, we like to move things, and we like to feel like we're doing stuff in the early game. So moving Untamed Beasts onto objectives and stuff feels super good in the early game. But in the majority of cases, it's not necessarily gonna actually do that much in terms of the board state. Of course, there are armies where it's annoying to have a pre-game move unit. So you're playing, like, you know, KO, for example. It's maybe slightly annoying. Like, yeah, okay, you can zone out some areas. But a lot of these shooting armies now, they're either long range or KO is as an army. It's just like, well, okay, you can zone me out, but I just score 5. Like, I don't care. Like, okay, I can't shoot you, but I don't care. Like, you still have to come to me. That's the thing with KO. Like, I'm still going to just score 5 battle tactics sitting on my ass. So you have to come and hit me. And then Slaves to Darkness is like, okay, we have 6-inch move or we're playing Varangard. That's basically like the vibe, right? Like, we got like no move or we're playing Varangard. A Splinter Fang move 8, I guess. But it's still pretty slow. And yeah, obviously once you do get close enough to the KO to be shot, then they just die in droves. So, okay, so Slaves to Darkness, I think overall, you know, the scoring is okay and the brawling is okay. Like, it's kind of okay at both. And that's why they end up in B tier. Okay, Sylvaneth. I think, again, we can put this army in B tier. Probably wouldn't put it higher than this. Again, it's one of these armies where if you play middle table armies, it's going to feel pretty good, right? Like, that's why I'm kind of putting it high in B. Like, if you play armies below this, it's going to feel like, damn, this is a pretty good army. And then you play armies that are above this. For the most part, yeah, maybe not actually, because a lot of these A tier armies, I feel like you have play. Okay, I think we can put it here actually, because I think if I'm looking at Big War and Slanesh, it definitely has good matchups into those. The 4 S tiers, it can't play. But the other games, I think it looks decent to me. Like, I think even in KO against Cities looks good. Sharks looks good. Yeah, I think it's mostly playable for me. Okay, Sylvaneth, the scoring is great. The brawling is not always great. That's obviously a weakness of the army. Is, again, it's like KO. Like, you can't kill your opponent's whole army, right? So that's what stops you from being S tier. So, you know, if KO and Sylvaneth had more damage, they'd be an S tier. But, of course, these shooting armies, or in Sylvaneth, like these kind of teleport armies, the damage always gets nerfed, or constructed so that it's not that much, because that's what balances them, right? The mobility is achieved at the cost of damage, okay? So that's where they are. Tzeentch, I think this army is not great, and I'm going to put them down here. Alright? I think, again, it's a classic case of over-nerfed, and I think Games Workshop have decided Tzeentch have been broken for, like, fucking ages. Let's just... enough is enough. So... It's a very uninspiring army to build a list for. It definitely still has play, but it's kind of, for me, it kind of feels like a slightly worse Soul Blight. Like, you really cannot brawl for shit. Like, you just can't fight on the board. But maybe you can score enough and have enough summoning and recursion that you can just win by a little bit. But I'm not... yeah, that's not the army for me. Okay. Skaven, I think it's the best army in the game. He said it. I've been holding. I've been saying maybe Seraphon is slightly better. You know, maybe some other armies like KO or Cities. You know, especially Cities pre-nerf. You know, but it's just the best army in the game. Like, basically zero bad matchups. People will tell you that the shooting matchups are bad, but then you play them and they're not. There are no bad matchups for this army. Okay, maybe if you play Lumineth and your opponent doesn't kill a Bell enough for you to summon a Warpseer, because if you summon a Warpseer, you just beat Lumineth because it makes everything Bravery 10. But if you don't, then okay, maybe it's hard, but that's a kind of a specific army. Other than that, there are so many armies here where the game is never going to be an actual game. Like, there's so many armies down the bottom here where we can come to the table, but there's not going to be a game involved. Like, if you play Ironjaws into Skaven, there's just no game. Like, what do you do as Ironjaws into Skaven? There are 3 bells sitting at the front of the line. Your armies can't kill any of them. And as soon as you go towards the bell, you're getting Great Plague. You're getting magic cast at you. And then, if you do survive, there are 15 Plague Sensor Bearers sitting on your face, and they do 100 damage to a 4-up save. Okay? So, 15 Plague Sensor Bearers can literally just kill a whole Ironjaws army in one combat phase. Okay? So, that's why, that's why for Skaven, the thing that makes Skaven so strong to me is the fact that in these good matchups, there's almost no game. And then in the quote-unquote bad matchups, that's what a game looks like for a lot of other armies, right? Like, where it's a bit back and forth and there's some priority potential. A lot of other armies, that's a normal game. Like, when you're playing KO, priority having an influence and all that kind of thing, it's a normal game. Right? With Skaven, you're playing Seraphon, it's like, okay, turn 3 to 4. If I get doubled, I probably lose. As long as he kills the bells and I don't get a Vermilord, I'm probably going to lose, right? Okay. But that's probably what a normal matchup should be, right? Like, back and forth. 50-50. For Skaven, most of its matchups are not that. Most of its matchups, it's not a game. Like, if you play a lot of these melee armies in the middle, even to above, right? Like, if you play, for example, Nurgle into Skaven, right? This is a melee army. That's not a game. Like, that should just be over. There are many reasons for it, but the main one that's kind of funny is that since Sensor Bearers and Nurgle, the no pile-in from the wheel does not work on them, and so it means that you're relying on charging them with Plague Bearers to have any chance of doing the no pile-in trick. But even if you do, there's so many get out of jail free cards with Skaven, and so many of their battle tactics, like the retreat, their own retreat battle tactic and bait and trap, mean that if you tag them, you're kind of giving them a battle tactic. So if you look at 3 bells on the board and you're like, okay, this unit's slow and doesn't do that much damage, so I should tag them, right? But the problem with that is you're giving them battle tactics. So against Skaven, you have to pick a street. It's like, am I going to stop Skaven from getting on the objectives and completely scoring me out of the game? Or am I going to tag them? Because, if I tag them, I'm possibly going to deny some objectives, but I'm not going to deny I'm going to give them a battle tactic, right? If I don't tag them and do nothing, how am I going to stay up on the objectives? Because he has so many, there's like this Scabex thing that's like one of the most bullshit units in the whole game, right? I target an objective and then move one guy on it and you can never score it no matter what you put on it, right? Or, I have these clan rats that require a major significant commitment to kill and cost 100 points, right? I have this unit that does 1,000,000 damage and sensor bearers, and if I stick Death Frenzy on it, it's like impossible to deal with for melee armies at all. Like, okay, you charge in, you kill it, you lose a unit, and you already lost a unit from the charge, right? Yeah, the bells. How do I deal with bells? Do I kill the bell, or do I ignore the bell and hit the clan rats? Okay, I hit the clan rats. But then, okay, I hit the clan rats, I killed a screen. That doesn't feel that great though, does it? Like, okay, I killed the screen. Cool, sick. Now I lose. Like, that's what it feels like playing versus Skaven. Such a frustrating army. Definitely needs nerfs. And I'll talk about that in my battlescroll video. But I think overall, I'm kind of past the point of pretending that the army isn't broken. It is broken, needs nerfs. Maybe not like as heavy as you'd think. It's one of those armies where a few 20-point adjustments can completely kill the army. I definitely think that the sensor bearers need to go up and the bells need to go up, and then it becomes an interesting discussion about what else you play, right? Yeah, but the Skaven list as it is now is insane and is the best army in the game, in my opinion. Okay, then we have Stormcast Eternals. There are some obviously like hacky, shoot your opponent off sort of armies here, but this is just a firmly B tier army for me. You know, you can run Tempestors and Vanguard Raptors, but I kind of feel like these builds that rely on taking out your opponent's big pieces are slightly... I would say that they are slightly reliant on playing against lists that are not optimized. Okay, that's basically what I would say about it. Like, if you play against lists that have not a lot of outs, so not a lot of ways that they can get back into the game once you lose a big unit. For example, I don't think the Lumineth has a lot of outs, right? So if you're playing Stormcast into Lumineth and you have the capacity to just kill Techless turn 1, then that can just be it, right? But if you play against something like Skaven, okay, you can kill the sensor bearers, but then what do you do about the bells? Okay, you can kill the clan rats, but then what do you do about the sensor bearers? Like, there's too many things to deal with, that having scalpel damage is not going to be enough necessarily. So I think that's where I would put them there. So that's going to be my tier list video. As I said, I'm going to have another video talking about how we can change this. The 4 S tier ones need desperate changes in my opinion. I probably wouldn't touch much in A at all. I probably wouldn't touch anything in B. And then from C downwards, I think we need some points adjustments for sure. Now, of course, we can do passes on internal balance. We can like change points values so that armies work better internally, but I'm just talking external balance. I will talk some internal balance in the next thing, but the focus will be mainly on external balance. How can we adjust armies so that they're at the same power level? So I'm going to end it off today. Of course, check out Onwards in the description if you're interested in coaching and seeing more of my content. But for now, that will be it. So I will see you now, and I hope you had a great start to the year, and here's to many more of these videos.